Everybody talks about happiness these days. I had somebody count the number of books with happiness in the title published in the last 5 years, and they gave up after about 40, and there were many more. There is a huge wave of interest in happiness among researchers. There is a lot of happiness coaching. Everybody would like to make people happier. But in spite of all this flood of work, there are several cognitive traps that sort of make it almost impossible to think straight about happiness. The second trap is a confusion between experience and memory. Basically, it's between being happy in your life and being happy about your life, or happy with your life. And those are two very different concepts, and they're both lumped in the notion of happiness. And the third is, it's the focusing illusion. And it's the unfortunate fact that we can't think about any circumstance that affects well-being without distorting its importance. What this is telling us, really, is that we might be thinking of ourselves and of other people in terms of two selves. There is an experiencing self who lives in the present and knows the present. It's capable of reliving the past, but basically it has only the present. And then there is a remembering self. And the remembering self is the one that keeps score and maintains the story of our life. That is, what we get to keep from our experiences is a story. And let me begin with one example. This is an old study. Those are actual patients undergoing a painful procedure. I won't go into detail. It's no longer painful these days, but it was painful when this study was run in the 1990s. They're asked to report on their pain every 60 seconds. And here are two patients. Those are their recordings. And you are asked who of them suffered more. And it's a very easy question. I mean, clearly patient B suffered more. His colonoscopy was longer, and every minute of pain that patient A had, patient B had, and more. But now there is another question. How much did these patients think they suffered? And here is a surprise. And the surprise is that patient A had a much worse memory of the colonoscopy than patient B. The stories of the colonoscopies were different, and because a very critical part of a story is how it ends. And neither of these stories is very inspiring or great, but one of them is distinctly worse than the other. And the one that is worse is the one where pain was at its peak at the very end. What defines a story, and that is true of the stories that memory delivers for us, and it's also true of the stories that we make up. What defines a story are changes, significant moments, and endings. Now, the experiencing self lives its life continuously. It has moments of experience, one after the other. And you can ask, what happens to these moments? And the answer is really straightforward. They are lost forever. And yet, somehow you get the sense that they should count. That what happens during these moments of experience is our life. It's the finite resource that we're spending while we're on this earth. And how to spend it would seem to be relevant. But that is not the story that our remembering self keeps for us. Now, the remembering self does more than remember and tell stories. It is actually the one that makes decisions. Because if you have a patient who has had, say, 2 colonoscopies with 2 different surgeons and is deciding which of them to choose, then the one that chooses is the one that has, the memory that is less bad, and that's the surgeon that will be chosen. The experiencing self has no voice in this choice. Now, the two selves bring up 2 notions of happiness. There are really 2 concepts of happiness that we can apply, one per self. And so you can ask how happy is the experiencing self. And then you would ask how happy are the moments in the experiencing self's life. And there are happiness for moments is a fairly complicated process. What are the emotions that can be measured? And by the way, now we are capable of getting a pretty good idea of the happiness of the experiencing self over time. If you ask for the happiness of the remembering self, it's a completely different thing. This is not about how happily a person lives. It is about how satisfied or pleased the person is when that person thinks about her life. Very different notions. Anyone who doesn't distinguish those notions is going to mess up the study of happiness. And I belong to a crowd of students of well-being who've been messing up the study of happiness for a long time in precisely this way.